Welcome to this episode of our program Arab Affairs. As usual, we will be discussing an important Arab development, but today we'll be speaking about the development of the Russian-Ukraine conflict, which is taking effect. This is the third consecutive day for Russian forces pounding Ukrainian sites. Today we'll be speaking of how this conflict reflects on the Arab world and what would be the measures taken by the Arab world in order to be able to overcome the developments as said. For the third day, as I said, Russian forces pounded the Ukrainian cities with artillery and cruise missiles, running for the third day running, but the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said the capital Kyiv remain in the hands of the Ukrainian. This as hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians fled westwards towards the European Union, and top Russian security official Dmitry Medvedev said Moscow's military operation would be waged relentlessly until their goals were achieved. On the other hand, today, of course, part of the measures that are being taken place through for our foreign ministry and Ministry of Immigration and the Egyptian expatriates, the measures that were taken in order to secure our expatriates there in Ukraine. There has been a kind of collective measures taken by the Egyptian authorities in contribution to many of the Egyptian institutions and ministries. Today, Minister of Immigration and Egyptian expatriates, Nabila Makram, held a meeting with representatives of the Egyptian community in Ukraine, including a number of Egyptian students residing in different Ukrainian cities, to follow up with the developments in Ukraine and the situation of the Egyptian community in Ukraine. During the meeting, the minister stressed not to be carried away by, not to be faked by the false news during this period, and depend only on the data issued from the government institutions for Egyptians' safety. Minister Makram also directed Egyptians to stick to areas where they are existing eastern and southern Ukraine that are witnessing clashes. She added that Egyptians who are able to leave the country from Romania and Poland to report the Egyptian, or rather to inform the Egyptian embassy in Kiev first. Earlier, the Egyptian embassy in Kiev announced that it was coordinating with the Egyptian authorities and the Egyptian ministry in Romania to evacuate Egyptian nationals in Odyssey after reaching the Romanian borders. As for Egyptians in the western part of Ukraine, the embassy called on them to head for the Polish borders. This as authorities there granted a 15-day visa access to Egyptian citizens who wish to return to their homeland. And before we continue on with our discussion, let us have this quick look on the Arab news that took place during this week.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi visited Kuwait on Tuesday, during which he held talks with Kuwait's Emir Sheikh Nawaf al-Ahmad al-Jaber al-Sabah over bilateral ties and a number of regional and international issues of mutual concern. During his one-day state visit to Kuwait, President al-Sisi stressed that Kuwait and Gulf state security and stability are part and parcel of Egypt's national security. He held talks with Kuwait's Emir Sheikh Nawaf al-Ahmad al-Jaber al-Sabah, saying that Egypt was looking forward to expanding cooperation with Kuwait in the political, security, economic and commercial ties. President Sisi congratulated Saudi King Salman bin Abdulaziz and Crown Prince Mohammed over the founding day. The president said that the event reflected the historical depth of Saudi Arabia and the path of development and renaissance witnessed on all fronts under its wise leadership, expressing wishes for security and more development and prosperity for Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia held celebrations to commemorate for the first time its foundation nearly 300 years ago. The government lined up events that included musical performances on Saudi modern history, fireworks, drone shows, and sound effects, with 3,500 performers taking part. Foreign Minister Sameh Shukri reiterated Egypt's firm support for the Palestinians and their rights and legitimate aspirations to establish an independent state as per the international legitimacy resolutions. Shukri made the remarks in a meeting on Wednesday with Azzam al-Ahmad, a member of the Executive Committee of the Palestinian Liberation Organization and a member of Fatah Central Committee. Shukri said that Egypt would continue to exert efforts and communication with different parties to set the stage for reviving negotiations between the Palestinians and Israelis as soon as possible. Libyan Prime Minister-designate Fathi Bashagha announced on Thursday that his government was ready and would be presented to the House of Representatives for a vote of confidence. In a statement, Bashagha's office said that he had held wide-ranging consultations with all political actors, including the House of Representatives and the High State Council. The House of Representatives had picked Bashagha on February 10th to head a new administration, replacing that of Dibeba, who was appointed a year ago as part of a UN-led peace effort. The International Monetary Fund has asked Lebanon to fulfill a string of preconditions before negotiating a bailout, pressing for steps that Beirut has long failed to deliver and compounding doubts over whether a rescue plan can be agreed. Sources said that an IMF deal was seen as the only way for Lebanon to recover from a financial meltdown that has plunged the country into the most destabilizing crisis since the 1975-90 civil war. The sources noted that the IMF terms for initiating talks on a bailout included a framework for fiscal reform, revamping the insolvent banking sector and audits of the central bank and the loss-making state power company.
Right, welcome back. And before I start with my discussion, let me first take Egypt's position from the very beginning. And Egypt, since day one or since Thursday, has said, or the Foreign Ministry said in statements, that it was closely monitoring the developments of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. And a Foreign Ministry statement said that Egypt has been calling for holding dialogue between all parties and resorting to diplomatic solution and pursue with an aim to quickly settle the crisis. The ministry stressed that the significance of reaching an immediate political settlement to the Ukrainian crisis to ensure avoiding a wide-scale humanitarian and economic crisis whose repercussions would hit the entire world and impact the global arena at large. Also, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has been speaking of arrangements that Egypt has made in order to return back its citizens and expatriates from Ukraine safely. To discuss the issue and the repercussions of this conflict on the Middle East, We have with us over the phone Mr. Khaled, Managing Director of Synergies for International and Strategic Studies. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon.
Right, let me first take, because I guess people in Egypt worldwide would really want to understand the measures that were taken by the Egyptian side in order to secure their expatriates outside. So how do you view measures taken by Egypt so far?
Well, I see that we have done really concrete steps to securing our citizens abroad, making sure that they return home safely and that they are reaching security and reaching shelter in a proper way. Of course, it is a chaos in Ukraine right now, and the country has fallen within 2 days. But I see that most of the efforts are concentrated around getting them to safety across the borders, where they can then either be transported back to Egypt or they can have a safe refuge there across the border in safety. So overall, I think that the ministry here is doing great efforts on that front, given of course the limitations and given of course the challenges in the situation.
Yes, indeed. If I may ask you about the contribution of all institutions in this, because we have seen since day one the response of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or our Foreign Ministry. Here we have seen today the response of the Ministry of Immigration and Egyptian expatriates there. In a meeting of representatives with the Egyptian community, trying to tell them the details. And we have seen also efforts made by all the Egyptian strong institutions at large. So how do you view how the Egyptian diplomacy has always been after its people, particularly outside, and exactly how do you view the efforts exerted?
Well, on the diplomatic front, Egypt has always taken the stance. Historically, we were always a nation that stands against invading other countries. This has been a more of a historic context of Egypt. So, of course, there is a delicate balance to be maintained here, given our relationships also with Russia. We're talking about a superpower that has strong economic interests and trade relationships with Egypt. However, we're also standing with our concepts of solidarity, and we're against the invasion mindset overall. Now,
I guess that we are keeping neutral towards the issue. So we are trying to ask for all parties to come to reason and negotiate.
Yes, of course. That has been the stance from the very beginning, that everybody needs to sit down around the negotiation table and try to reach an agreement or a settlement that will prevent the loss of lives, because that is our diplomatic philosophy, and that we have carried this out in several areas before, and we see that as the best course of action for the current time. We also need to understand that the war in Ukraine doesn't only affect the European Union; it has serious repercussions on the region and on the globe itself. We're still recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic. We still have supply chain shortages that the world is trying to recover from. So this whole thing puts a lot of strain on economies, specifically on the marginalized economies, or on the what we call the lower middle income economies that are still trying to get a push out of the COVID-19 situation as well.
Actually, Mr. Khaled, you pinpointed your finger on a very important issue, which is the topic of our episode today. the repercussions of this conflict on the region, on the Arab region, since we are speaking about the Middle East and the Arab region, we are tackling exactly this point. So we're speaking here about different angles for those repercussions. We're not speaking only about economy, but rather on several areas. So we're speaking here about strategically wise and how the Arab world would really be affected with the different alliances, and we know that we have always maintained a kind of good relations with the whole world at large. How do you think this Ukraine or Russian-Ukrainian conflict, which has its also reflection on the Russian, or rather it has its backdrops on the Russian-Western at large relations, how would that really reflect on us politically? Of course, we'll speak economically. And how are we supposed to be dealing with this?
Well, I would classify the repercussions into three main categories. So we have the political repercussions, of course, or the geopolitical repercussions. We have the economic repercussions, and we also have humanitarian repercussions. So if I'm able to delve into each of these categories really quickly, on the political front, we will see a more leverage for the Arab region on negotiating with the EU and with the US. Of course, the shortage of energy supply that is going to be stemming from this conflict to the EU will give the Arab regions a bit more of negotiating power on several of the key issues. However, this may also negatively affect specific countries like Libya, Syria, and also Yemen, of course, where the EU has been trying to get more positioning in their negotiating role in these nations. On the economic front, we see a lot of more strain being added to specific countries. We see that Morocco has just had a very bad drought the worst drought in 20 or 30 years. Tunisia has been struggling economically to replace its trade deficits.
Hello?
That need to be stemming out of this. Lebanon is one of Ukraine's biggest wheat importers. So that would, of course, have a huge repercussion on it. So Ukraine exports primarily wheat, barley, and corn, which would also impact the angle of food security as well in the region. That could lead to heightened conflict as well here. Also, on the political front, we see that Russia has been playing a very key role in the Iran nuclear deal negotiations alongside its partners from the West. So it would be, or it could lead to a further worsening of the situation on the front with Iran. On the humanitarian axis, we see specific countries that are having delicate balances between the governments and their people right now. So we have this in Tunisia, in Morocco, in Lebanon, in Yemen, in Libya. We could see potentially a worsening of the humanitarian factors there, specifically with relations to healthcare and to food security as well. So this is how I would classify the reactions or the reflection of this war on the region of the Middle East in general. Now, how should we deal with this? I strongly believe that this has to stop. I mean, the killing has to stop. The loss of life has to stop immediately. We need to bring both parties to the negotiating table as soon as possible. Of course, Russia goes into this war uncontested, relatively, because they know that Western opposition is not going to be present, at least in the military senses. However, there are strong sanctions that have been put in place that will strongly affect Russia's capability on developing their military and on several of their key industries, like the car industry and the automotive industry, as well as the space and aviation industry as well. So all of this should put enough stress on Russia to get it back to the negotiating table, to sit down and stop the loss of life on this aspect.
Actually, what is needed to be done, what I meant here is not what we, or rather what Russia and Ukraine need to do and how the world should be acting, because I think the conflict has its own parties which we are totally neutral towards the case. And anyway, what I meant here is how we are supposed to be confronting or dealing with the situation, and the situation we are in right now towards the conflict as it is.
Okay, so on that front, we have already been taking concrete steps in that aspect. So we see that Egypt has already sourced enough wheat. We've heard a lot of statements from the government saying that we have enough grain to last us until November. So we've been, this war didn't come overnight as well. There was enough time for countries to prep themselves and to measure the impact of such a crisis on them. So we've seen that Egypt has done that. Lebanon is also in trade talks with other alternative providers of wheat to provide it with an alternative importing channel other than Ukraine. So overall, we do see some cases in where there is a slight there is a rise in the oil prices, which would put countries like oil exporting countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE in a better financial position for recovery from COVID-19. So overall, we have been taking already concrete steps on this front to mitigate the effects of this war on the region.
Yes. You know, sir, that some of the Arab countries are already together in the gas forum, the Mediterranean gas forum. And how do you view from this position how those countries involved will be reacting towards the issue? Do you think that there will be a kind of replacements to some elements or some countries in trying to compensate Europe, and definitely we're speaking here about a number of countries who are within this forum, plus already other countries who are rich with the gas and oil resources?
Yes, we have seen a lot of strain being put recently from the U.S. on countries like Qatar, for example, who is one of the leading exporters of gas, to reroute some of its supply to the EU, replacing some of its Asian contracts. However, the issue with gas, it's not as easy as it sounds, because it's not just, gas is sold in futures. So replacing some of these contracts might be a little bit tricky, specifically because Qatar is also at its limit of its production. It's at its maximum capacity of its production right now. We might see here an opportunity for Egypt to boost its gas exports, of course. We would see opportunities here for Libya as well. If we can manage to get a bit more stability in Libya, we could see a replacement or a boost in Libya's exports on oil and gas. But these are complex issues because you have the issue of transport, you have the issue of the rising cost of transport as well, and the supply chain disruptions that we're already trying to recover from. So it's not as easy as it is, but of course that is a very viable alternative that a lot of people are talking about right now, and a lot of governments are looking into right now. It would put a bit of strain on the European Union countries for the heightened energy prices, but it would provide us with a better opportunity. That's what I meant at the beginning by saying that it would give the Arab nations a bit more of negotiating power as well on that front.
Right. Finally here, if I might ask you, what's your expectations for the next, or for the upcoming stage, or what are the scenarios that could unfold?
Well, we're looking right now into the conflict as it is. So we're seeing that Russian forces are already a couple of miles off Kiev right now. So it is clear that their interest is in toppling the government and instituting a different government there. However, we are seeing a lot of resistance from the existing government, from the Ukrainians themselves. So I do not believe that this issue is going to be resolved within the next week. However, there is a lot of strain right now on Russia, both internally and externally, to stop the fighting, specifically also because they are taking much more casualties than they have expected to take on at the beginning from the Ukrainian resistance. So they might reconsider their plans. The financial sanctions that have been put from several nations, whether from the UK or from the EU or from the United States or Japan, have been dealing a strong blow to the Russian economy as well. And they will
actually
mean that,
not as the Russian president has spoken about that. I mean, in all the speeches of the Russian president, he did not reiterate any of financial blows to his economy. Anyway,
yes,
that's the position. This is the position, and that's the other.
I'm sorry. I was just saying, you have to take into consideration that Russia has one of the largest foreign reserves as well. It has an excess of 650 billion, specifically designed to withstand some of the shocks. But the supply chain disruption to its industries could mean a crippling factor, specifically in its exports and specifically for its current needs right now. So the stop of the exports of computer chips is very vital to its current state, either on the military front or on the production of high-tech equipment as well. So we're seeing here a lot of the sanctions are really targeted to inflict a little bit of pain on Russia. Will it be able to withstand it? Yes, it will be able to withstand it. But also, we need to know that Russia is recovering as well from the impact of COVID on its economy.
Definitely, the whole world
itself.
is. Yes, indeed. Yeah. Indeed. Mr. Khaled Said, Managing Director of Synergies for International and Strategic Studies, we thank you so much for being with us and for your input here. Before we end our topic or our discussion for the day, let's have this quick report, and I guess that will take us to the end of this episode. Next Saturday would be another Arab important affair. Until then, it's goodbye.
The foreign ministry said that Egypt affirmed the importance of upholding dialogue and diplomatic solutions, as well as endeavors that would hasten a political settlement to the Ukrainian crisis. The ministry said in a statement that Egypt was following with deep concern the successive developments regarding the situation there and affirmed the importance of upholding dialogue and diplomatic solutions. The statement added that such desired political settlement would preserve international security and stability and ensure that the situation did not escalate or deteriorate. The statement comes a few hours after Russia's invasion of Ukraine and its development that unfolded early on Thursday. Egypt has meanwhile reviewed plans to deal with the economic impacts of the Russian-Ukrainian crisis that the country will possibly face, including on wheat imports, the flow of tourism, and petroleum prices. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli said in a cabinet meeting that the Egyptian government has been studying the possible effects of the Russian-Ukrainian crisis on the prices of commodities, especially wheat. Such crises significantly impact the prices of a number of basic commodities worldwide, according to Madbouli, affirming that Egypt was closely following up on the economic and political repercussions of the crisis. Prime Minister Madbouli added that Egypt has reserves of wheat that were sufficient for more than 5 months, adding that the government seeks to diversify its wheat importing sources and obtain wheat from other countries. While 40% of Europe's natural gas needs reportedly coming from Russia, the Russian-Ukraine crisis poses a direct threat to natural gas supply to European countries. Egypt, which has achieved self-sufficiency in natural gas in 2018, is planning to use its position on Europe's doorstep to become a major supplier of liquefied natural gas to the continent, which is transitioning away from other fossil fuels. Egypt has the infrastructure for the transport and handling of natural gas with a main network of 7,000 kilometers of pipelines, as well as a distribution network of 31,000 kilometers and 29 gas treatment plants, in addition to the 2 LNG facilities, Idku and Damietta plants. Egypt confirmed that no worries over the Suez Canal amid Russian-Ukrainian standoff. The head of the Suez Canal Authority, Lieutenant General Osama Rabia, said that Egypt was ready for all possible scenarios resulting from the tensions. Rabia added that the Suez Canal is prepared for any developments in case of war breaking out between the two countries, underlining the Suez Canal's previous successful experiences in dealing with major crises such as the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic and the stranded, ever-giving container ship that blocked the Suez Canal last year.